Day is made possible by Republic Bank, Hubbard's, Classic Lighting, and Budget Marine Grenada.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Season 1 finale of our Climate Reality. For the past 3 months, we've discussed climate change in probably all of its forms and how it impacts human civilization. We've focused a bit on what has happened here in Grenada, and for those of you who have doubts, climate change is an ongoing thing, and it is happening. Tonight, we have a very special program. In fact, we have 5 very special guests with us, and we will sort of recap what we went through in the first season, and a little later on have an open discussion on some of the issues. Tonight we have with us Mr. Gerard Tamer from the Points-Lane Met Services, Mr. Terence Smith, he's an engineer, Mr. Leslie Smith from the ministry, and Mr. Trevor Thompson, he's a land use planner, and of course Dr. Sonia Nixon, medical practitioner. They've all been on the program before, that is with the exception of the lone lady, and we're going to have a good time this evening. So do stay with us. Just before we go to the break, folks, I just want to share with you that sometimes climate change is considered a very complex issue. And according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the impacts of climate change on different sectors of society are interrelated. Drought can harm food production and human health. Flooding can lead to disease spread and damages to ecosystems and infrastructure. Human health issues can increase mortality, impact food availability, and limit worker productivity. Climate change impacts are seen throughout every aspect of the world that we live in. However, climate change impacts are uneven across the country and the world. Even within a single community, climate change impacts can differ between neighborhoods and individuals. Long-standing socioeconomic inequities can make undeserved groups who often have the highest exposure to hazards and the fewest resources to respond more vulnerable. We'll be back in just a moment.
Home is easy as 1, 2, 3.
Thinking about your new home? Think easy. Think a Republic Bank Home Easy Loan. Think affordable. Think convenience. Think Republic.
Home is easy as 1, 2, 3. Republic makes home easy.
Wow, that was such a breeze.
Own your home with ease.
So whether laying that first brick or purchasing an existing home, we've got you covered. Republic Bank will get you those keys hassle-free in no time.
Home is easy as 1, 2, 3.
Apply for a Home Easy Loan today for a chance to win a cash prize.
Getting your new home is easy with Republic Bank.
Republic Bank, we're the one for you.
Terms and conditions apply.
Solar Vision is the champion. We lighten up the whole Caribbean. Solar Vision is the champion. We lighten the whole Caribbean. The ultimate solution to get rid of pollution. We going green to be healthy. Going green for security. Going green for prosperity. Going green with Solar Vision. We going green.
Available at Grenada Trade Center, Montrouge, St. George. For more information, call 444-5291 or 404-9012.
Our environment is our responsibility. Budget Marine contributes by selling environmentally friendly products. For example, we sell lightweight open boats that require a relatively small engine. Best to combine with our Tohatsu 4-stroke engines. They use little fuel and have a low emission. Carib Marine solar panels are specially made to withstand the Caribbean climate. The panels are suitable for use at home and on the boat. The required chargers and converters are also available from Budget Marine. Keeping your car and boat clean extends the lifespan. but residues of the cleaning products disappear in nature. We at Budget Marine sell eco-friendly cleaning products from EcoWorks, not harmful to nature and also clean very well. Plastic junk in our oceans is a major problem. Fortunately, there are companies that clean up and reuse the plastic into usable products. Marlowe, manufacturer of lines and ropes, produces docking lines made out of plastic waste. Another company is Sperry Shoes. Sperry has a collection made from used fabrics and plastic waste. Just a few examples of how we at Budget Marine contribute to help protecting our environment. We care.
It's the 4th edition of Hubbard's Live Free for 1 year promotion. Cuatro Punto Cero. It's unbelievably amazing. You can win free fuel, free drinks, cash prizes, free property and vehicular insurance, free cable, TV and internet, free electricity, free coke, free water, free cooking gas, free paint supplies, free passes to Sunshine Promotion events for 2023, free groceries, all for 1 whole year. And every winner receives a lunch package. Be sure to fill out the entry forms and enter it into the marked entry boxes at all Hubbard's departments and at participating outlets. Promotion runs from April 1st to September 30th, 2023. Draws will be held every 2 weeks. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back, everyone. As I said earlier, it is season 1 finale of our Climate Reality, and we're taking a broad look at what we've discussed throughout the season. Just before we get into that, we'll ask our guests to take the usual 30 seconds and just tell us briefly, about themselves. And we'll start with Mr. Leslie Smith. Leslie?
Hi, good evening, Godfrey, and good evening to your listeners and all of the viewers of our Climate Reality. So my name is Leslie Smith. I've been the National Ozone Officer of Grenada for the last 20 years, with specific responsibility for the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer. Additionally, I provide oversight on solar PV installation and applications in Grenada. Has been part of the Ministry of Climate, Resilience, the Environment and Renewable Energy. And I also offer assistance with energy efficiency in the cooling sector and general energy efficiency.
Thank you, Leslie. Jerry?
Okay, Godfrey, thank you. Good night, Godfrey, and good night to members of this distinguished panel, and good night also to all listeners and viewers of GBN. Gerard Teamer is the name. At present, I'm the acting manager of the Met Department of MBIA, and for the last few years, I've actually been having special responsibilities for climate services and the climate sector and the climate work of the Met Office. So it's a pleasure again to be here, Godfrey.
Thank you very much. Trevor?
Thank you very much, Godfrey, and it's my pleasure to be with this esteemed panel tonight. Trevor Thompson, former Chief Land Use Officer, Ministry of Agriculture, and have been involved in representing Grenada as a climate change negotiator over the last 5 years. And it's really my pleasure to be here to talk about the issues affecting the agricultural sector with regards to climate.
Thank you, Trevor. And of course, joining us on Zoom tonight, Mr. Terence Smith. Terry?
Yes, good night, Godfrey, and good night, colleagues. Good night also to the listener and viewing audience, Terence Smith. I am by training a civil and sanitary engineer, and I've been involved in water and the environment in Grenada for the last 30+ decades. More recently, I've done some work as an independent consultant in climate change projects and adaptation projects and the like. It's my pleasure to be here, and I look forward to an entertaining and fruitful discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Terry. Dr. Nixon?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Godfrey. Good evening, my colleagues for tonight. It's really a pleasure to be here. You know, in the past I worked, I'm a general practitioner. By
Dr.
training,
Nixon,
but I'm
can you just turn your camera on? We're not seeing you.
I'm sorry. My bad. I'm sorry. Good evening, everyone. I hope you can see me now. So my name is Sonia Nixon. I'm a general practitioner, but I'm also a public health consultant, particularly focused on global health issues. You know, tonight I listened to my colleagues just introduce themselves, and I realized how isolated we are from the whole general picture. Tonight I will speak on health issues and health concerns, yet I don't see a lot of it within the health sector being, you'd hear every so often about climate change. With climate change, it's not going to bother us. The agronomists will take care of the food, and Terry will take care, make sure the river runs right, etc., etc. But the truth is, this is a topic for us all to work together, a topic for us all to collaborate to mitigate whatever challenges there can be, whether in the health sector, whether in the infrastructural part of Grenada. So I hope tonight this discussion will bring unity and collaborative attitudes among all of us and among all Grenadans in general. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nixon. So tonight, to our listeners, of course, we welcome you, those on K105 FM, our viewers on GBN Television 711, and also our friends on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. So tonight we'll review what is climate change and how it occurs, and also explain how activities in different sectors contribute to climate change and also how they are impacted. So we are going to start our discussion this evening with Leslie. Leslie, you've been here before and we've had lengthy discussions on this whole issue. Can you just review for us what is climate change and how it occurs?
Well, thank you, Godfrey. And by asking me to do that first, it means that you don't want anybody else to speak, because we can take the entire program talking about what is climate change. Yes. But in summary, climate change is really a shift in the long-term temperature and weather patterns. And to understand it better, you must be able to distinguish between weather and climate. So weather, as Mr. Tamer would tell you, is a short-term period, at an instant, so to speak. But climate now is over a longer period of time. And then climate change can be brought about by natural causes, from the sun's activity, from volcanic actions, but most of it in today's world is by anthropogenic means, by man-made contributions. And all of that has contributed to climate change. Climate change results as a result of global warming. And this is because of increase in global atmospheric temperatures by gases referred to as greenhouse gases. And greenhouse gases now are gases that absorb a lot of the ultraviolet rays that come from the sun and keeps our atmosphere very warm or increase the temperature. And that has resulted in catastrophic effects to both human beings, to plants, to our environment, to our infrastructure. Numerous impacts have been resulted as a result of these increased global temperatures, global warming, and climate change. And maybe later on we can dissect into some of these impacts on the agriculture sector, on our health sector, on our plant sector, our infrastructure, our oceans, and everything that has been impacted by climate change. So it's a phenomenon that has started a long time ago. And as a matter of fact, over the last 100 years, we've seen maybe an average of a 1.1 degree increase in global atmospheric temperature. And there are predictions now for the end of the century what the global atmospheric temperature would be. In addition to that, all of the efforts that are being put forward now by nations throughout the world still cannot reduce the temperature to an acceptable level by the end of the century. And so much more ambitious actions are needed by nations throughout the world. But the impacts and the effects of climate change is all around us. And for the naysayers and the people who don't believe in climate change, they just have to step out of their homes during the day, or they just have to wait for the hurricane season, or just follow the news. Every decade for the last 30 decades, the average global temperature have increased. Every year on air, the average temperature have increased, and Mr. Tamer can confirm that as well from the Met Office at Point Celine. And so the impacts of climate change is real and is there for everybody to see.
Right. You mentioned earlier greenhouse gases, and of course you did explain what they are. Can you tell us, maybe identify a couple of these greenhouse gases and how they actually help in creating global warming?
Principally, there may be 4 classes of greenhouse gases. The most important one, or the most common one, which is about over 70% of all greenhouse gases, is carbon dioxide. And essentially it comes from burning of fossil fuels. The other one is methane, which basically comes from a lot of agricultural practices. And then we also have nitrous oxide. And then we have industrial gases like your fluorinated gases, hydrofluorocarbons, your chlorofluorocarbons or CFCs, and a lot of these other gases. In addition to that, you have water vapor, which is also a greenhouse gas. And ozone itself, which has a good impact in protecting us from UV rays, is also a global warming gas, which is a greenhouse gas. And what these greenhouse gases do is that they absorb a lot of the heat that is reflected from the Earth's surface that comes from the sun and traps it into the atmosphere and results in an increase in the atmospheric temperature. And that is what is making it uncomfortable for us, melting the ices on the mountaintops, the glaciers are melting, causing the temperature of our oceans to increase, and we're getting coastal inundation from our waves, adverse natural disasters, hurricanes and floods and tsunamis and so on. And there's a myriad of impacts that have been resulted because of these global atmospheric temperature increases.
Right, wonderful. Gentlemen, any one of you like to ask Leslie anything? Any questions that you'd like to ask or add? Because tonight we're opening the discussion and we want to get as much information out there as possible. So anyone would like to add or question Leslie? If not, we can go ahead. So I want to move, we're going to move to Mr. Tamer, because we know that many sectors are impacted by climate change, weather patterns, water, health, agriculture. And in the past few weeks, we've been getting, some really hot weather. And for some reason, I think Mr. Tamer, being as he said, the acting manager of Med Service, probably felt sorry for us and decided to give us some showers. Jerry, let's talk a little bit about that, the relationship between climate change and extreme weather events.
Okay, Godfrey. Well, one might say one of the effects or one of the byproducts of climate change is extreme weather, because what happened is that we can define climate, as we said before, as a long-term average of activities. So when we have gotten used to a certain pattern when looking at the different atmospheric elements, we look at our temperature, our moisture content, and so forth. So we have become used to a certain pattern. But we see now the change in composition and the change in quantity of some of these elements. And going hand in hand with that is a change of weather patterns. And the experts have agreed and have now correlated the change in weather patterns to the change in the contents and of these atmospheric conditions. The increase in greenhouse gases, as Mr. Smith has pointed out earlier on, traps the outgoing radiation from the Earth's surface and create now this warming effect. So we have a general increase in the Earth's temperature, not only the Earth's surface temperature, but the temperature of the lower strata of the atmosphere, to be more precise. Now, this is the part of the atmosphere where our weather systems occur. And we have seen over the years, once that constitution or that the behavior of the elements within that lower strata of the atmosphere, once that is changing and once that has been disturbed, the result is different change in our weather system. And we have had some quite extreme events. Not too long ago, in the last few weeks, we had some severe flooding in like Pakistan, for example. And when you look at the data, we see that the temperatures in Pakistan at that time were abnormally high. So we had a lot of melting of the ice in the Himalayas. And local reports can tell you that the river levels were abnormally high for this time of the year. So you had swollen river courses, and what happened? You put some rain on top of that, and we ended up with some very severe flooding in Pakistan. Now, we look at our region, the Caribbean. Our average sea surface temperatures at this time of the year, going back for the last 30 or so years, is around 27 degrees Celsius. Okay? But for this month, April, we have a lot of patches of 28 degrees Celsius, and we haven't yet reached the hot time of the year yet. Okay? Hurricane season is still a few weeks away. So you can see that we are changing, and these changes now are driving some of these extreme weather events. Now, maybe in the next 100 years, these weather events or the severity of these events may become the norm. But for us now, we are definitely seeing some increases and some weird increases in our weather patterns and systems, and there is empirical data to show that the changes in the atmospheric conditions are the driving forces behind those.
Mr. Tim, are there any activities, let's say, for example, in different sectors that contribute to the worsening or to worsening the impacts of these extreme weather events?
Oh yes, of course, and Godfrey, and this is where we need a lot of education. You know, there's an old saying, what is joke for school children is dead for crop.
Yes, indeed.
So you might be in one particular sector and doing something that maybe you have done for generations or is the norm for your sector. But the end result is that you caused havoc for another sector. So for instance, how can you tell a farmer, let's say, in the highland areas, let's say Beaulieu or Van Dorm, Annandale, okay, that he is destroying the reef of granite, which is impacting the tourist sector and which is breaking down the reef, okay, which is protecting the coast from a little storm surge. Okay? So we have to get some of all the sectors to know what they're doing and see how it impacts other areas. For instance, another example, somebody might be practicing some agriculture thing and they cutting down trees and so forth. Now, the more you do that, you're depleting the chemical, or you're changing the composition of the localized environment, because no trees mean you have more carbon dioxide. Okay? Less trees mean that the humidity in that particular area is less. So therefore, you have a drier area. When you have a dry area, you are more susceptible to fires, wildfires, forest fires, etc. When you have less trees, you are more susceptible to faster runoff, greater floods. Okay? So different industries sometimes, or practices in some sectors actually affect the whole issue of climate change. And the bigger the scale, the more dangerous it is. We have, when we look at some of our satellite images, we can actually see the amount of hot spots across southern South America and Central America, where there are actually forest fires burning. Okay? And we are not talking about just a little fire like in Grenada, somebody will burn, you sweep a yard and you burn some dry leaves. We're talking about hundreds of acres burning, so much so that it can register on on a satellite image. Okay? And there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these spots happening on the South American continent, for example. So you can imagine how that changes the local climate, the microclimate. Yeah. Now that practice might be good for the farmers or the loggers or whoever is doing, but it is not good. It's not good for the climate system, which is definitely would be affected by these practices.
We always hear that with climate change, there's going to be more intense hurricanes and so on. Talk a little bit about that and why with climate change we would have more intense hurricanes.
Now, one of the results of climate change is increase in temperature, the global temperature, global warming. Okay? Now, hurricanes and tropical cyclones thrive on warm water.
Humid.
Okay? Now, I mentioned the fact already that we are seeing an increase in sea surface temperature for our region. Okay? So what we are actually doing, we are actually providing one of the key ingredients for the formation of tropical cyclone, and not only the formation, but the formation and sustenance of tropical cyclone. So the cyclone already have a ready-made comfort zone there where you can build and grow. Okay? And with the increase in temperature, increasing sea surface temperature, because remember, when we talk about global warming, we're not only talking about the temperature of the air, the temperature of the land, but it's also the sea surface temperature, which is something that we oftentimes overlook. Okay? And increasing sea surface temperature does not only have an effect on not only the tropical cyclone development, but also the marine life. But that's another topic. Okay? But the sea surface temperature, the increase in sea surface temperature, which at this time of the year we've seen 28 degrees already, which is not normal, okay? But it is changing to that. Okay? That is a recipe, a good recipe for the development of tropical cyclones. And they feed on that, they strive on that, and climate change with the global warming is actually helping it.
Right. One last question I want to ask you, Jerry, and I've been thinking, I'm listening to you, and I want you to help us and our listeners to explain it. Because, for example, we hear a lot about the polar ice melting, and it's causing sea level rise. Now, if you have, and I want to take it home, if you have a glass of water, and you go to your freezer and you take a couple of blocks of ice and you put it in that water, the water gets cold and you get a cold drink. And I want to liken that now to the glaciers in the North Pole and South Pole that is melting. Shouldn't that help to cool the oceans rather than the reverse that we're hearing?
Well, it will cool the oceans, but it will cool the oceans maybe in the immediate area. Okay. Now remember, we're talking on a planetary scale here, so we talk about thousands of miles. Okay. Now, when we have increasing sea surface temperature, okay, remember that increase is big enough to melt the ice. Okay, so if there is any cooling of the water, it will be a localized cooling for a while. Okay, okay. So that advection of cold water far south, like into the equator, so it is not strong enough.
Okay. Okay.
The warming effect is greater.
Right. Leslie?
Yeah, Godfrey, I just want to come in here because one thing you didn't mention about that glass of water is that when you add the ice, the level of the water increases in the glass. So the same effect is in the ocean. The level of the ocean rises. Get coastal erosion, saline intrusion, the removal of our beaches, economic activities affected. So it may cool the ocean, but the other impacts can be far worse than that cooling impact. So we must bear that in mind as well.
All right, wonderful. So let's take a short break. When we come back, we have a lot more to talk about. Say this, folks, we'll be back with you in just a moment.
Home is easy.
Thinking about your new home? Think easy. Think a Republic Bank Home Easy Loan. Think affordable. Think convenience. Think Republic.
Home is easy as 1, 2, 3. Republic makes home easy.
Wow, that was such a breeze.
Own your home with ease.
So whether laying that first brick or purchasing an existing home, we've got you covered. Republic Bank will get you those keys hassle-free in no time.
Home is easy as 1, 2, 3.
Apply for a Home Easy Loan today for a chance to win a cash prize.
Getting your new home is easy with Republic Bank.
Republic Bank, we're the one for you.
Terms and conditions apply.
From the farm to the store to your home. Supporting farmers, catering for your needs. The Food Fair Supermarket provides fresh fruits and vegetables from its 2 convenient locations for over 5 decades. The Food Fair Supermarkets, where you can fill your baskets without emptying your pockets.
Our environment is our responsibility. Budget Marine contributes by selling environmentally friendly products. For example, we sell lightweight open boats that require a relatively small engine. Best to combine with our Tohatsu 4-stroke engines. They use little fuel and have a low emission. Carib Marine solar panels are specially made to withstand the Caribbean climate. The panels are suitable for use at home and on the boat. The required chargers and converters are also available from Budget Marine. Keeping your car and boat clean extends the lifespan. But residues of the cleaning products disappear in nature. We at Budget Marine sell eco-friendly cleaning products from EcoWorks, not harmful to nature and also clean very well. Plastic junk in our oceans is a major problem. Fortunately, there are companies that clean up and reuse the plastic into usable products. Marlowe, manufacturer of lines and ropes, produces docking lines made out of plastic waste. Another company is Sperry Shoes. Sperry has a collection made from used fabrics and plastic waste. Just a few examples of how we at Budget Marine contribute to help protecting our environment. We care.
Solar Vision is the champion. We lighten up the whole Caribbean. Solar Vision is the champion. We lighten the whole Caribbean. The ultimate solution to get rid of pollution. We going green to be healthy. Going green for security. Going green for prosperity. Going green with Solar Vision. We going green.
Available at Grenada Trade Center, Montrouge, St. George. For more information, call 444-5291 or 404-9012.
Welcome back, everyone. Season 1 finale of Our Climate Reality, and we're taking a broad look of Season 1. I want to bring in now Mr. Terence Smith. Terry, one of the big things with climate change is how it impacts our water. And a lot of that here is consumable water, because there isn't a lot of that. But we know, and there's evidence to show that climate change can seriously impact our water sector. Talk to us about this.
Yes, Godfrey. Well, first of all, when we're talking about water, it's important, and I'll try to do that at the start. It's important for us to define what we mean by water. So when we, in the context of climate change, when we're talking about water, we're not talking only about the water that we get in our tap, potable drinking water that we get from the water supply and Nawasa. But we use the broader term, the resources. So let's establish at the outset, water here, when we're speaking about water tonight, we're talking about water resources, in a holistic sense. So we're talking about the rainfall, the rain that falls on our water catchments, watersheds in the mountains and so forth. Some of that rain goes into the ground, percolates into the ground. Some is used by the plants, trees and plants and so on. There's evaporation There's evapotranspiration through the plants. Some of it forms little rivulets, little gullies, little rivers, streams, as the case may be. And eventually the water flows to the sea, and it flows into the oceans, all right? So we're looking at, there's a term that's used from ridge to reef. We need to think about our water sector, our water resources, from the ridge, from the mountain tops, from the interior of the country, the forested areas, right down to the coast. Including, very important, is the potable water, or the drinking water subsector. So well, the thing is that several of the impacts of climate change on water have already been mentioned by my colleagues. So I'll just kind of briefly kind of recap. So perhaps one of the more important aspects is more intense rainfall, which Jerry has touched on. More intense rainfall, you may say, well, okay, if we get more rainfall, it's better. The catchments, the water table would rise, there'd be enough water and so on. The streams would be going full. So the streams that Nawassa has dams on or intakes and so on, everything would be good. The problem is that when you have very intense rainfall, it's usually accompanied by siltation, erosion of the soil, and siltation of the rivers and streams, leading to siltation of the dams or intakes that Nawassa uses. So when you have, for example, intense rainfall, it doesn't have to be a hurricane or even a tropical storm. You know, there have been, as Trevor knows very well, there have been instances of just light rainfall over 3 or 4 days. It happened up to about 3 or 4 years ago. And you had significant negative impact on Nawassa's water supply. So you have siltation of the dams. People would get heavily silted water, muddy water. Nawassa's approach, which is, I think, a proper approach usually, is to shut down those systems, right? So, as we say, water will go in the pipe, and varying from several hours to, in some cases, several days, if there's a significant damage, where Nawassa has to now go and get heavy equipment and desilt a dam that could take several days and so on. So this is one of the most significant impacts. And I've mentioned how it could impact the end user of water, potable water. Another important impact of climate change, I think Lester mentioned it, is what is referred to as saltwater intrusion. So when you have an increase in the sea level, right? You have the water table, right? Where there's the fresh water, which is sitting on top of the seawater, because the seawater is more dense, it's heavier. It's called a freshwater interface. And when you have an increase in the level of the sea level rise, right? It pushes down on the freshwater, and there's an inland encroachment of the freshwater seawater interface, or freshwater interface, and it's referred to as saltwater intrusion. The impact of that is that ponds, be it in Carriacou, the ponds that are used to water animals, will become increasingly saline as the saltwater encroaches. And with respect to Nawassa and its potable water supplies, the few Nawassa wells in the southeast of Grenada, in the St. David's, Bailey's, Darknet areas, and so on, there have been instances over the past several years where there's increased salinity in these water supplies, and roughly about in the vicinity of about 10% of Grenada's overall freshwater supply, potable water supplies from Nawassa are sourced from these groundwater wells, or boreholes, as we call them in Grenada. So that is another discrete, very important adverse impact of climate change. It has been happening over the last maybe 15, 20 years, and my understanding is that increasingly so. So saltwater intrusion. Jerry also mentioned more intense hurricanes. More intense hurricanes, of course, would lead to, I mentioned it, increased rainfall, precipitation events with their negative impacts, and also would bring physical damage to Nawasa's infrastructure, so the water treatment plants, the dams, possibly pipelines. I mean, the hurricanes make old mass, as we say, with raw water lines and transmission lines and so forth, right? Droughts, more frequent droughts. So the prediction for the Caribbean, well, most of the Caribbean, and particularly the southern and eastern Caribbean, is for dry seasons and wet seasons. So more intense periods of rainfall, but overall the trend over the last several decades is a decreasing trend of the average annual rainfall. We would have spoken about that a few weeks ago when I was on with Dr. Cashman and Dr. Peters. More frequent droughts means that there is less water in the watersheds for Nawasa to collect throughout the dry season, and it puts severe stress on the water production facilities. Hence the reason why the Water Authority, for many, many years, despite all of the capital projects and so on that have made some significant improvements in specific areas, but for many, many years, Nawasa has not been able to provide a 24/7 supply to a number of areas in Grenada, particularly in the south of the island, throughout the year. That is because of that is being exacerbated, is being made worse by drought periods. For example, us up here in Mardi Gras, we get water from the Mardi Gras water treatment plant. We'll be very thankful for the couple of days rain, including this evening, in the catchment. I'm sure that would have kind of at least partially filled up depleting dams and so on. But our pressure, the pressure from our Mardi Gras water treatment plant, I can speak for up here, has been significantly decreasing over the past days and weeks because of the fairly prolonged and intense dry season. So I will stop here now. I don't know if any colleagues want to ask any questions, but these are some of the major. You have other aspects like increased evapotranspiration and its impact on agriculture and so forth. But these are some of the major water-related negative impacts of climate change.
Quickly, Terry, before we move on, how do you think the impact that climate change has on water can spill over and impact other sectors? And what are some of these sectors you think it can impact?
Yeah, okay. I'll touch on just two. That is a quite exhaustive topic. Something that many people could relate to. Agriculture. If you have decreased river flows, if you have the watersheds, now I often use the analogy of a sponge. Imagine your watershed being like a giant sponge. As I mentioned, when you have rainfall, precipitation, at any time, whether it's dry season or rainy season, a portion of that rainfall percolates into the soil, right? And it depending on the condition of that watershed, if there are many trees and the roots have to, to keep the soil in place, and there's a fair amount of shade and so forth, you would have a better chance that watershed would continue to release what is called base flow, right? Water would be trickling out from the soil, getting into the streams and rivers, and keeping them at a certain minimal flow. But let's say a fairly decent flow throughout a dry season. Let's say it's a real drought, a very intense, prolonged dry season. But when your watersheds are being destroyed, right, through deforestation, again, some of the effects have been mentioned: deforestation, forest fires, wanton clearing, slash and burn for various reasons, and so on. It decreases the ability of that watershed to release water during dry period. When there's less rainfall, you are setting up a scenario for conflict between water to be used for agriculture by farmers. I'm talking here now about the increasing use of surface water for irrigation by farmers, for obviously growing crops and so forth, and the use of this water by the Water Authority, by its dozens of surface water intakes that NWASA uses for providing treated water supply. So, and we know there are a few celebrated cases. There are cases where conflict between, let's say, between farmers for use of the same limited water supply has led to violence. There are a few well-celebrated cases. Trevor may know a bit more about these than me and can elaborate if necessary, but this is so the potential for conflict between competing uses or the increased competition for water supplies, right, between agriculture and drinking water. Also, another one I can touch on is the water and tourism, right? We're a tourist economy. Preponderance of our tourism infrastructure is located where? In the south and southeast of the island, right? Those areas tend to be at the extremities, right at the end of NWASA's water distribution networks, right? So there are no major rivers and streams in the southern part of the parish of St. George. As I said, they are the groundwater wells that provide in the vicinity of 10% of the Grenada's water production is somewhere in the vicinity of 7.5 million gallons per day. That drops significantly during the dry season or intense periods of drought. So you have your major users of water in the tourism industry right at the extremity, at the end of your distribution networks, right? And that creates, again, significant supply problems for NWASA. That is where in times of drought, and I saw it increasingly on the roads over the last couple of weeks and months, this pretty intense dry season this year, you see these big water tankers up and down the road. You see them pulling up at various water hydrants at various key locations and so forth. So I'll stop here now, but these are perhaps two of the more easily relatable impacts between climate change and water and how it spills over, so to speak, on other sectors. There are a few more we could speak about as we get on further into the program.
Okay. Thank you, Terry. Gentlemen, anything anyone wants to add or maybe question? Because I know Trevor.
I would suggest Trevor may want to elaborate on the conflict issue, conflict between water for agriculture and water for drinking purposes.
Right. Well, Trevor, I mean, of course, we're coming to Trevor now. So, Trevor, maybe you can start by talking to us about the relationship between climate change and agriculture. Someone said, and I'm trying to remember, I think it's my good friend Steve Maxime who says that agriculture is neither a villain or what was the other one? It's both ways. And I know earlier our good friend Jerry had taken a couple nips at you as it relates to agriculture and climate change. So talk to us about that relationship.
I mean, our culture whips agriculture because it is seen as, I would say, the least important in society. The farmer is not somebody that is highly regarded. Nobody really encourages their children to become a farmer. But not recognizing the important role agriculture plays in the social well-being and stability of this nation. They not understanding the mega impact the agricultural sector has on livelihoods and ensuring that children can go to school, farmers, people can have a home to live in, etc. So it is, I would say, one of the most, if not the most vulnerable sector to climate change impacts. You talk about sea level rise, you talk about droughts, you talk about temperatures, you talk about changing weather patterns and rainfall. Whatever impact climate change is having, the agricultural sector oftentimes get devastated again and again and again. And of course, it's taking now longer and longer for the sector to recover when it gets impacted. Still, I don't think we have ever really done a comprehensive vulnerability assessment to climate change of the agricultural sector. So we really have not really, I would say, document what, if we were to say, get impacted by a severe hurricane, what would be the total, what would be the sectors that are in agriculture most vulnerable? And is it tree crops? Is it vegetables? Is it livestock, etc.? We need to do that. And one of the driving forces of this whole is a change in consumption patterns that we're seeing. And of course, the issue of changing land use. They are also playing a significant role in this whole thing that people see in agriculture. A lot of times we think is agriculture. Construction. People moving higher up the slopes to build houses, etc. Deforestation. They are some of the major, and not so much the practice, the agricultural practices, right? That are the contributors. We are not major livestock producing country, you know, although livestock, methane, etc. contributes to the greenhouse gas emissions. We are not a major contributor of that. The deforestation, however, is going to have an impact, and that's something we need to stay and reverse as much as we could. So the whole sector is at risk, and the infrastructure that supports agriculture is at risk. Ivan devastated a lot of those roads and secondary roads and tertiary roads and footpaths, etc. And a lot of those areas have never recovered. Right. So, in fact, from Ivan, we've seen that a lot of areas that were either in agriculture have now gone back into natural vegetation, which is a plus for the environment and for the climate. But I want to say that agriculture is not just farming. There's forestry. Significant contributor to reducing the impacts of greenhouse gases. We have we alluded to the soils, which is a major carbon sequestration, trapping carbon, the soils of Grenada. And of course, we also have the wildlife and fisheries and all of that is involved in it. So one of the areas that I think the sector has to improve is the whole issue of use of data and information, right? We still have a lot of farmers that depend on rainfall for farming. So we call it rain-fed agriculture. If the rain doesn't fall, they can't grow a crop. Their livelihood is impacted. And then we have the introduction of climate-smart agricultural practices, which a lot of people think is only greenhouse gas, shade houses and irrigation. No, there are a lot of other traditional practices that could benefit and benefits the environment that are part of this whole climate-smart agriculture practice that we see an uptick in greenhouse. So let's not, I don't want to say agriculture as the whipping boy, for climate change at all. It is not. It is, in fact, it contributes a lot to reducing the impacts of climate change, as my colleague alluded to. The trees, the nutmeg trees and the cocoa trees, etc., helps to maintain the humidity and cooling of the temperature, etc. So taking in carbon dioxide, etc. So we benefit. I think for us, the sectors that could be devastated if agriculture collapses is, we have tourism, you have education, you have the financial sector, and my colleague, I'm sure she's going to talk about the health sector, the impacts on health, if we can produce our own local food, etc. And youth and the social aspect, the social impacts of agriculture cannot be underestimated. We do not see a high level of homelessness, etc. in Grenada, because people could still eat a breadfruit. You could make an oil dong, you could get some green fig and out of your backyard. If we were to lose these I don't want to call it backyard garden, but these small farming around homes, etc., the impact on the social side of, and that's one of the areas that climate change is having a lot of impacts. The social impacts. In fact, it is alluded that a lot of the migration that you see to Europe, etc., climate change is a driving factor, because a lot of the people, they can't farm the lands anymore. They have no water, etc., because of droughts, so they have to leave where they are and move to the cities and move to Europe. So in fact, migration patterns is something that's been seriously looked at now as being influenced by climate change. So in general, land use change is one of the major driving forces here, and it's impacting negatively on agriculture, right? And if we don't seek to address that, Grenada as a small island state, which is one of the most vulnerable, as we know, could become even more vulnerable. And of course, I think that the social side of that is a concern, at least to me, because we still can feed ourselves to a larger extent. At least I was looking at some data, 26, we based on the index in terms of food security, we are about the 26. We should be maybe around 60%, right? But we are 26%. And that is low, but it's not as low as compared to a lot of other countries. But there's a lot more we could do, and that will benefit the climate if we increase production, increase reforestation, increase tree crop cultivation, agroforestry, etc., improve the landscape, get more involved in integrated water resources management and watershed management, an area that NAWASA, etc., doesn't contribute anything to ensuring that the upland watershed, where a lot of the water comes from, is preserved and protected. We have seen the eroding of the legal precedents that have been set to protect those areas, and people figure, it's my land, I could do what I want with it. No. If that land is for the preservation of a natural resource for the whole of society, no, you cannot. And so these are the areas I think we need to step up on from an agricultural perspective, which looks at land and its use, etc., to ensure that we have a balance between between the human demand that is driving a lot of the climate change, the human, people want to have air conditioning in their home, they want to have more, eat more imported foods, etc. Those are the main drivers that we have to address. And some of the negative impacts of those things on health, which my colleague from health is going to speak on, is what we need to address holistically.
Right. Leslie, I know you wanted to chime in.
As I admire Trevor's defense of the agriculture sector, I too being a trained agricultural individual, and not wanting to join with a team on the whooping on agriculture, we must expose some issues in agriculture. For example, one, some of the agricultural practices are indeed contributing to climate change. We can't run away from that. Right? So that's why Trevor is talking about climate smart agriculture. The use of energy in agriculture, agro-processing, we still use energy from fossil-based fuel. So we need to transfer from those practices, because that's a major contributor. The inefficient use of water, it happens in agriculture on a daily basis. Trevor is a water management expert as well. Inefficient use of water, again, is an issue. The use of chemicals in agriculture, inorganic fertilizers, all of that has an impact on climate change. So there needs to be this drastic transformation in the way we do agriculture, because agriculture is indeed a big contributor. You mentioned methane from the animals. It's not a big issue in Grenada, but in several parts of the world where they have large cattle farms and so on, the methane emissions is significant. So the way we do agriculture needs that transformation. We need to introduce technology into agriculture to evade and to get around all of these practices that contribute to agriculture. So it's not to whoop you further, Trevor, but it's to expose what is happening at the local level in agriculture that is contributing to climate change as well. And then the reverse is true. So food security is a concern for all of us. And because of the climatic conditions and the changes, it's affecting the yields of crops, it's affecting productivity, it's affecting animal production, etc. So it's a twofold impact here. And so there needs to be this collaborative and synergistic approach to how we mitigate against climate change, and at the same time employ the good practices in agriculture for the production and for food security.
The whole issue of technology transfer and use of data and access and use of data and information is critical for the sector, that transformation side, right? The issue of knowledge transfer is also critical. The cost of the technology, that's one of the big challenges. So the ministry's position is that we do not support overhead sprinklers. We only advocate for drip irrigation. But water use efficiency is a major challenge, because even though you show the farmer and you tell him, listen, it's the roots of the plant that needs the water, he still wants to and wet down the leaf
with the whole place,
with the sprinklers, right? Wasting of water, inefficient use. So there is a lot of knowledge and that needs to be transferred, and technology that needs to be transferred. The use of data, when CIMH and the Met Services say, that we looking at a reduced rainfall over the next 3 months, what crops they plant, when they plant those crops, etc., has to be seriously considered. Because that's one of the reasons why I see gluts on the market and then scarcities, because there isn't a synergy between the use of information and data and cropping patterns and cycles, etc. So that is a major challenge that we have to overcome. Lots of other places in the world have overcome it. We can do it if we discipline our minds to do it. The whole issue of the other factors around land degradation and cultivation practices is extremely important. And where you have land degradation, it means that you're losing soil and you have more erosion. That means you have less carbon sequestration is happening. and of course, Climate Smart Agriculture advocates for for use of more organic matter, composting, etc., and less chemical fertilizer. Right. That is why we're doing a national soil survey now to help us to make that transition, because we may, and there's a suspicion that we may be using fertilizers we don't need. Right. You know, maybe we over fertilizing, that's creating a toxicity in the soil, and that's one of the reasons why we've seen reduced production. Right. So we need to acquire the data and information and use it. So when the extension officer goes with his app on his phone and say to the farmer, listen, your soil type here is so and so and so, you need to be using this fertilizer, not that fertilizer, they have to accept that as facts, because the test results are there.
Trevor, I think Jerry wanted to come in for a second.
Okay, yeah, the point I was going to make is that we are seeing, and there have been several regional initiatives to move away from the traditional way of farming and so forth, okay? Getting the practitioners to be able to move away from a sensory observation, like a farmer may tell you, okay, we had good rainfall this year. No, exactly what is good rainfall? Okay? How do we put this into some sort of quantity? Okay? And we are finding very slowly, though, that some parts of the agriculture sector are transferring to that way of thinking, because we now have different companies and different organizations doing particular variety of crops which will withstand, let's say, a low rainfall period better than other variety. And the whole issue of getting all this information, as Trevor rightly said, use of the data down to the end users so that they can make this kind of decision. Because the thing is, one variety may have been good 30 years ago may not really work today because the condition has changed. The temperature is now higher temperature, normally reducing flower dropping and all sorts of things. You know, so we are seeing a slow but steady change in farmers, and I shouldn't just say farmers, but the agriculture sector, moving into this more scientific way of doing things. And I say CIMH and CARDI and so forth have been doing a lot of regional initiative to help change that way of thinking and that kind of practices. And as Trevor rightly said, it's a mindset that we have to change, because, you know, my grandfather farmed this year, you know, this piece of land here, and this, and we did the moon, and we did this. I mean, nothing wrong with that per se, but as the conditions change, you have to change.
Okay, right. We're going to come back because I have quite a few questions I want to throw at Trevor and Leslie as well. But a very, very important sector that we need to focus on, and we've been hearing a lot about it, the area of health. So before we go to our final break, I want to bring in Dr. Nixon here to speak a bit about that, because after that we want to go into an open discussion, you know, and of course get Terry to speak a bit about the environment. And so, Dr. Nixon, climate change and health. The heat is a big thing as it relates to our health. Talk to us.
So I hope you can hear me, because I've had a
Yes, we're hearing you very well. We are.
Good, thanks. Because I've disappeared from my screen. So, you know, I'm listening to my colleagues speak tonight, and I realize that, well, I kind of don't need to say anything, except that I speak about the direct consequences to our population of climate change. The World Health Organization kind of developed this phenomenon, this thing that speaks to health in all policies. Now, I hear everybody talk about what happens in their sector. Nobody speaks of where the health sector is involved. And at the same time, I don't know that we speak very much in the health sector of climate change. So one of the things that is definitely missing is that whole integrative approach, totally integrative approach towards climate change mitigation. But, you know, it's happened insidiously. It's happened a little faster in recent time, but it's happening. And one of the things we have to emphasize from a health standpoint is that climate change is real, and we're all feeling the impact. You guys remember when St. Vincent had its volcano 2 years ago? It's just 2 years or 3 years. But there's a volcano and the landscape changed. Remember the flooding? You remember how people didn't know how the river was going to run, and the rain came down, and how much challenges they had moving people into. We had COVID at that same time, and that's one of the things that can happen. The coexistence of things that sudden onset catastrophes, hurricane, for example, or flooding, in the midst of another health related illness, pandemic, for example, or some outbreak or something, or that these catastrophes actually occasion an outbreak or something. You know, we can have extremes of occurrences of temperature change. I saw a video this week that speaks to hail falling and, of course, people saying snow, but big ice particles. And saying kids have beach. That is what they sell in Nevis. That's what they sell, beach. Yet they were having lots of hail, lots of heavy rain, and people really exclaiming about it. Whether or not it is true, the bottom line is that those are possibilities. I've seen hail in other parts of the Caribbean. That's not what we want to sell. We sell tourism. But at the same time, when you think of the extremes, think about the people who work in agriculture just happen to be out in the sun. And the fact that you are at greater risk for having sunstrokes. And sunstroke is a deadly thing. Severe dehydration, the increase in diseases like hypertension, the fact that extremes of temperature can actually cause people to become very irritable, very anxious. Standing in the sun and you're waiting and you're vexed and nobody gets upset. And Terence spoke earlier too about violence. Remember, the origin of violence and that kind of conflict, interpersonal conflict, actually starts with the intrusion of our space. People moving, living in small societies, having less access to amenities because more concentrated society like cities means that there's less space to go wherever you want. Live in the country, have your yard outside up and play. You go live in an apartment, you find all kind of problems. So those are things that we don't see. If we have to decrease the amount of space that we live in, for example, going to live in a shelter, think of what happens. You live in a shelter, you lose your privacy, you don't have access to cook when you want, you eat what people give you. It's going to cause a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, a lot of inappropriate behaviors, and a lot of stress on people who try to just keep calm, right? The potential for other abusive practices when you have to move into different spaces, right? Consider, however, the population that's kind of most vulnerable, the people in extremes of ages, or children exposed, for example, to pollutants in the air and all the particle dust that can be there. That thing that you see when you look and you see or look like smoke, like I tell people, if there's something hanging in the air, even if it's smoke or Sahara dust, it's not good for you. It's not supposed to go into your lungs. But we've been faced with that a lot in the last couple of years. Our older population, often, especially extremely old population, who often are unable to express just how unwell they feel, or we forget that they get dehydrated, right? Or they live alone and don't have access to running water because we've had a catastrophe. The poor, the very poor people who are not able to provide appropriate housing for themselves as one of the social determinants, right? Pregnant women, they're also at risk because they tend to respond a little more to heat and tend to have elevated blood pressures. That's a problem, and a problem for the health sector as well. People who have low health education, if we live in a poor environment or we live in an undereducated, in an under health educated population, they will not understand what are the challenges. Do they go to, they see water running, the water is contaminated. Are we going to have that water? Are we going to still put the water for our children to drink? The possibility of having foodborne diseases like Vibrio, which is kind of related to cholera because our waters get contaminated from whatever soil. Of course, somebody spoke earlier of drinking water that's contaminated by toxins from agricultural practices. Those are the things. Of course, inland spread of water and flooding anyway. What if you had hypertension and couldn't get to your health center? Would you have a stroke before? What if you had a stroke and couldn't get to the hospital? right? What if you had any illness and you couldn't even access your health center because there has been some challenge? What if we had big disasters that we could not supply the needs of basic foods, healthy water, medications, because we depend a lot, as someone said earlier too, on what is important to our country. Remember last year? Remember with COVID, us not getting all the products we're accustomed to getting? What if we have more broad disasters where nobody's really producing? How do we feed ourselves? Okay, so we need to take into consideration all this. The issue of mental health is very important because it keeps coming up as one of the major challenges that we will have, okay? Because people just become very irritable. People already mentally ill will become even more ill. Do we have the facilities? No. On a good day like today, that we don't have enough mental health services. What would we do when people get more ill, when people get depressed? We have an increased rise in things like suicides, okay? Because people just can't cope anymore. We kind of concerned in particular, however, about our children, younger children, babies whose immune system, and children who have challenges, health challenges, where their immune systems are not prepared to deal with all those attacks, right? They have increased sensitivity to those allergens, those things in the atmosphere in particular that cause respiratory diseases. People who smoke and have chronic or obstructive pulmonary disease, all of those conditions are going to become worsened if we have poor air quality. Asthma, increase in asthma because of pollens, but also because we have more debris hanging around after a big disaster. And we know that cockroach urine is one of the most common triggers for asthma. If we have a lot of debris, cockroaches are going to be happy to proliferate. People who live in poor populations where we have not been able to remove all of the garbage, the heavier, the waste, right, are going to be sicker. And with less access, are we then going to ensure that in constructing, that we actually encourage people to build climate smart houses? We're going to still allow them to build where there's shale and they go down to the sea when warm wind blow or a hurricane? Are we going to ask people to build and to build responsibly so that the people at the bottom don't have to take all their runoff and have their houses compromised because of the run of the hill? Those are things we have to consider because they eventually do affect the health of the population that's affected by this, okay? We have to look at what the determinants, whether we have a proper political as per policy, whether we have those categories being taken care of. We have to look at whether things like discrimination exist. We've seen it. Our political system sometimes give rights to some people and not to others. Yet all of us, the entire population, is going to be almost equally vulnerable when there are mass events. I remember living in Jamaica in 1988 with Hurricane Gilbert. And I remember how almost all of the middle class and upper class people ended up living in their helpers' quarters because the helpers' quarters was the only place that had slab roof. And so families had to move into the part of the house that nobody really visited, right? And cut because everybody's roof went, especially in Kingston. So we have to take into consideration all of the environmental remits, all the particularities of how our health sector is going to be affected, because the truth is, it is, right? And I can talk about a whole lot of stuff, but I want us to have a chance to discuss this. So I want us to look at what our public health sector can do. Are we going to integrate the challenges of climate change into our own public health education, our own public health policy development? Yes, we should, because we also have to put all policies into health. Are we going to export our public health policies and our public health needs into the other sectors so we can all work collaboratively? Because at the end of the day, the public health takes into consideration the well-being of people. If this place weren't populated, we wouldn't have to worry, would we? No, we wouldn't. But we're populated, and population is people with needs. So yes, we can think of other things in isolation, but I think we have to break down the silos and come together to work with this. We have to understand what are the causes, why is it that we are having the challenges, and not just the agricultural sector, not just the water sector, but everybody together. We have to sit at the same table and start focusing on how we're going to develop policies and action we're going to take. Everybody, a little bit by a little bit, right? And how we're going to educate our population to prepare themselves. But we can talk, and we talk well now, we talk very good. But how are we going to get all of this operationalized? What does our population need to know? Because we have to extend the understanding and part of the responsibility to the people in the community, okay? And somebody mentioned about vulnerability assessment. Well, I was kind of looking for some of the stuff about what happens to us. So how does all of this, how vulnerable are we in the presence of a disaster related to climate change? And there's hardly any information. Yes, there's probably some data, but we really need to sit together and look at all the data to ensure that populations are paying. So there are lots of other things I'd like to say, but I think we kind of all said everything that everybody needs to know about everybody else. And I think it's time for us to sit together and explore a common way to get out of this hole into which we found ourselves. Not just in Grenada, but look at the bigger world and look at examples of people. Somebody mentioned the fact that we already had migrating populations into the city. You know, it's going to cause a lot more challenges. It's going to cause a lot of health issues. Overcrowding causes a lot of health issues. When people cannot get proper food, we have obesity and hypertension and diabetes, and it's going to go on and on and on. How do you find solutions? Yes, we're probably very vulnerable as a small island state, but we also have to become very creative as to how we're going to prevent the challenges that exist as a result of climate change.
Thank you, Dr. Nixon. Gentlemen, you won't believe, because time has gone by so fast, I am going to skip this break to the end, and I want to come back because quickly, Leslie and Terry, I want you to speak briefly to the environment. We hear a little bit about, a lot about sea level rise, coastal erosion. Here in Grenada, we are seeing a lot of things happening in our coastlines. Trevor mentioned the whole thing of construction. We're seeing that happening. Gentlemen, and maybe Leslie, you can probably speak quickly first on it as it relates to policies and some of these things that can have a serious impact as a result of climate change. So, for example, coastal development. And as against the rise in sea levels, and Terry, our environment and what is happening, and of course the impacts of climate change. So we may have to take 2 minutes here quickly because time is going by quickly. So maybe Terence, we can start with you.
Yeah, well, you know, Godfrey, it would be remiss of me if we end this program on a negative note. I think we've kind of, all of us have kind of sounded a clarion call. We've highlighted the negative impacts of climate change. But there are some positive things that are happening in the society, and I would like to, my further contribution, make reference to some of the activities that are taking place or are in the process of being addressed. If I may, I'd like to touch very briefly on an initiative that's been ongoing in Grenada as part of a major project initiative in the water sector, a climate change adaptation project, that's referred to by the acronym of GCREWS, the Grenada Climate Resilient Water Sector, GCREWS. One of the elements of the GCREWS project, which has been ongoing for the last 3 years, it's a $42 million project, funded largely, but not totally, largely by the Green Climate Fund, with contributions from the government of Grenada and the German government. One of the components of the GCREWS project calls for the creation of a water resources management unit to take away that responsibility from NAWASA, where it currently lies. I think Trevor and Jerry have spoken about the importance of data and information. So I just want to make a plug here for, you referred, Godfrey, also to the importance of policies and policy initiatives. Grenada has a revised national water policy as of December 2020. And that national water policy also calls for the creation of that water. So there are activities that the policymakers, that government could and should be taking to contribute towards climate change adaptation in the water sector. And I just wanted to highlight this initiative and perhaps some comments from my colleagues as far as that is concerned.
Yeah. Leslie?
Quickly, government having recognized the impacts of climate change and what it means to us, a number of policies and regulations have been put in place over the years to mitigate against that. And maybe very briefly, I can speak to a few. There are over 10 of them. I can just list a couple just for the benefit of the audience. There's the first and second nationally determined contributions that has been submitted to the UNFCCC with regards to our ambitious actions. The National Climate Change Policy is another one. The National Sustainable Development Plan 2035. The National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan is another one. Then we have the National Environmental Policy and Management Strategy. The National Adaptation Plan is another one. Then we have the second National Communication for the UNFCCC. The National Cooling Action Plan. In terms of energy, we have the National Energy Policy. We are currently developing an Energy Efficiency Act. We have minimum energy performance standards for some electrical appliances and energy efficiency labeling and so on. So there are a number of policies that are already in place and others that are currently being developed to mitigate against the impacts of climate change. But while I'm here, Godfrey, I just want to indicate also that I would want to say that there should be a sort of a five-pronged approach in dealing with this situation in a holistic way. One, we have to look at national policies and legislation. We have to look at the political commitment as a second option. We have to look at adequate financing mechanism to augment all of the activities that are to be undertaken. Public awareness and initiative has to be center and upfront in this whole drive. And finally, the building and enhancement of capacity to handle all of the issues relative to climate change. And if we can holistically package that nicely, I think we will be in a good space to contribute towards this global effort in reducing atmospheric temperatures by the end of the century.
Thank you very much. Trevor, any final words? Because we're practically out of time.
Yeah, just to add that, I mean, there's a lot of work that has been done. Leslie has alluded to quite a few of them. Just to add that in terms of the solar renewable energy, the concessions that are offered to that, they are almost, you pay no duties, even with if you're looking at to bring in electric vehicles, the duties and that has been substantially reduced. So I think the government has been working, the policy structures have come into place, but I think we have lost some momentum with regards to the public awareness that Leslie alluded to, that we need to ramp up again, that let people understand that you have a part to play in this. Everything you do, good will contribute towards reducing the impacts. Anything that you do, any bad practices that you continue to practice will have a negative impact on your livelihood. Mm-hmm. All right? We see what happened in Ivan, where after the hurricane, a lot of people who was in the service sector, etc., they moved back to their rural communities and started getting back into agricultural production, etc., which was a boost for us. But we once again seem that our consumption pattern is having a negative impact on our environment, and it's something that we need to continue to develop policies, mm-hmm. plans, programs to address. So I think we've made some progress, but there is a lot of work that needs to be done, and we can't take our foot off the pedal, right. Because we will pay the price for it.
Right, thank you. Leslie, just before I give you your 30 seconds, Jerry?
In continuing the good news, I know my office is now involved in two health projects. Okay? One where we're using the Grenada data to develop a heat index for Grenada, so that we can warn the population of, times of excessive heat. And we have, there's a correlation with that hospitalization and deaths and so forth. So there's a project in the making now. Actually, we're working on that together with the health sector to develop that. There's also another project I know that is being organized by, is being run by CAFA, which is an early warning system for vector-borne diseases and things like dengue and so are given high priority. Again, using the Grenada data, and they're doing all the modeling and so forth. So those are two very, very important health sector initiatives that will be coming on stream very shortly, and our office is part of the main stakeholders in this. But Godfrey, it is important that the general population have to understand that climate change is no longer something you see on CNN or something on BBC or a documentary or on Discovery Channel. It's happening here right now, and it's happening in Grenada. Our nights are generally getting warmer, and Dr. Nixon can tell you high nighttime temperature is not good for us. And our nighttime temperature, we are not cooling as much as we used to cool before, okay? And that is a significant thing that we have to be conscious of, okay?
Thank you very much. Leslie, you just wanted to make a quick closing.
It's of me if I leave this program not indicating to people what are the two main contributors of this greenhouse gas and climate change. The electricity generation sector and the transportation sector, where most of the petroleum-based fuels are being used. So we need to have a renewable energy mix for electricity generation and electric vehicles. And as Trevor was saying, government currently offers 100% duty-free concession on all solar PV components and up to 75% on electric vehicles that people can take advantage of and make their contribution towards reducing the use of these petroleum-based fuels.
Thank you very much. So Terry, 30 seconds quickly.
Yes, Godfrey. I just want to end by making a plug for increased rainwater harvesting in both in our private sector as well as our public sector. Just imagine if all of our institutional buildings, all of our government buildings, if our national stadium were equipped to collect rainwater with underground storage tanks. What a difference it would make to all of these various facilities, all of our schools, etc. I agree that there is need for greater public communication, and we need to get the message out there that climate change is real, but there are adaptation measures that we can take to lessen the severe impact. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Terry. Dr. Nixon, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. I'm really happy that this conversation has been very integrated, because I think we cannot continue to focus on climate change. As everybody says, it's there, it's in your face, and in your face very rapidly. That we can all, I hope this gives us an opportunity to really sit together and not just do things theoretically, but when I go to my health center or I go to my doctor, there must be a conversation on what climate change is happening. Just as you go check for your blood pressure, we must understand how the heat affects you. And we must also understand what each of us can do. It must be the responsibility of everybody. All sectors must have equal contributions. At the end of the day, the people are the ones who are going to be affected, and so they should understand what they can do to prevent what the challenges are. Hopefully this conversation can become a very practical issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nixon, and of course to the rest of the panel, Mr. Terence Smith, Mr. Leslie Smith, Mr. Jared Tima, Mr. Trevor Thompson. I thank you so very much for appearing on the program to help share information about what is real, not a hoax, something that is real. I just want to add to the good news, because you guys did share some good news, and I just want our listeners to know that tonight it is the season finale of our Climate Reality, but of course season 2 begins at the end of this month. Before I go, I just want to, I must say a very special thanks to some individuals, and I think it's important to mention them. Mr. Leon Charles, he has been very instrumental in helping this program to succeed with the structuring, assisting with finding resource people to be on the program. Dr. Spencer Thomas, also very, 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 instrumental in making this happen. My team here at the GBN, Mrs. Janelle McDonald, Mr. Joseph Cador, Mr. Darius Slocum, Mr. Michael Alexis, Mr. Kellen Batiste, Mr. Timon Parrott. I also want to say thanks to Mr. Terry Walters, who started with us as my co-host, but of course he had to move on because of some responsibilities. Also, special thanks to the Caribbean Institute of Meteorology and Hydrology, the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility, the Office of the Prime Minister of Barbados, the Ponce Met Services, and of course, very, very importantly, our sponsors who made this program possible: Republic Bank Grenada Limited, Hubbard's, Classic Lighting, and Budget Marine. We are very thankful, we are very grateful for all the support in making this season a successful one. To all of our guests who appeared on the program, we thank you very much. It was indeed a pleasure having you, and of course we're looking forward to having you back and others in season 2. Season 2, we will be looking at combating climate change, yes, adaptation and mitigation measures, and I think all can agree from the conversation that there is so much more to speak about, because climate change, it is complex, but it is very broad and it is very real. Thank you all for supporting, and of course we look forward to being with you again in season 2. Thank you and have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night all.
Home is easy as 1, 2, 3.
Thinking about your new home? Think easy. Think a Republic Bank Home Easy Loan. Think affordable. Think convenience.